And I've been dreaming on in my head like I've seen it, a life worth living.
Hello everybody, my name is Jacob Lemons and welcome to another episode of LemonTalks. Now in this episode we are going to be covering The Proud Family and its reboot, The Proud Family, Louder and Prouder. Just to give you a quick roadmap of the episode, we are going to talk about The Proud Family, why it was successful, and why it ended. And then we're going to talk about The Proud Family, Louder and Prouder, and talk about whether or not it's been successful. And the reason that we're not going to talk about why it ended is because that in particular is still up in the air. Now, when I refer to the reboot today, I am just going to say Louder and Prouder. That way we all know that I'm talking about The Proud Family. And that'll be easier to distinguish between the reboot instead of saying the entire name all the time, all right? Now, getting straight into The Proud Family, most of the information that I got actually came from Randy Jones at Vulture.com. See, Randy Jones actually conducted an interview with the show's creators, Bruce W. Smith and Ralph Farquhar. So, they talk about how The Proud Family has been successful in its first run because it made minorities feel seen and heard in a way that felt rare at the time, and that's by having a family cartoon centered around a young adolescent, which was Penny Proud, and navigating her adolescence while also learning about Black culture and history. Being one of the first family-oriented cartoons on Disney to mention and educate their audience about Kwanzaa even. It's also went on to educate about Black history, such as Angela Davis's activism and the Tuskegee Airmen in World War II. These are topics that are rarely talked about just in passing, and so to include them in a daytime television show that was watched by families across the globe, it was something that was truly groundbreaking and something that the creators took pride in. In fact, for the last 15 years, ever since the show had been ended, I'm not going to say canceled, and we'll talk about that later, but ever since the show had ended, even back in 2010, they had been pitching for a reboot to occur just because of how revolutionary this show was. Now, it also covered topics such as homelessness, classism, and racism, but it did so in a way that stayed focused on the characters in the show instead of taking shots at the society that was watching. And we will talk about why that's so important with Louder and Prouder later on. Unfortunately, with both of these shows, there is no data on what the voice actors were actually getting paid, how much money was made on the show, or even how many viewers they had week to week. There are simply countless good reviews for The Proud Family, describing it in the way that I just did, that it was a show that made minorities feel seen and heard, and also presented all of these, I guess you could say, controversial topics, but in a very easy way, in a way that could be understood even by children. And since they were presenting them in such a way, it made it easier to talk about even amongst adults, and we actually saw a sort of unity over The Proud Family that can be difficult to find sometimes in most series, just because when we're asked to see things from another person's point of view other than our own, empathy can be hard for some people to have. And so it was a struggle to find a show that was like this that made it very easy to empathize. So why did it end if it was so good at doing what it set out to do? The show had originally ended simply because they had reached a natural ending in the Proud Family movie, which was the conclusion to the Proud Family series. All the characters seem to have had a happy ending in that movie, and Disney typically has a policy of not letting series run too long in order to make way for other shows, as well as other up-and-coming actors and actresses, just giving them opportunities to shine in the light by creating new series. Whether those new series were better than the previous ones, it just gives them an opportunity to grow as actors and actresses And Disney has used this formula for as long as I can remember. And really, that formula of doing like a couple or a few seasons and then ending things has been around since I was a young child. It's really only changed with the arrival of Disney Plus, the streaming service, and along with that streaming service came the opportunity to reboot some of these famous series. And so now we are going to move into Louder and Prouder. Some of the information that I got didn't just come from vulture.com with the interview from the creators, but it also came from Melissa Smith at medium.com. So when the show creators pitched the idea for the series to Disney's producers, they actually loved the idea, but replied by asking if they would just do the Proud Family again. See, Louder and Prouder was actually going to be something entirely different, but Disney figured since they had done the Proud Family before, they didn't see any problem with doing the Proud Family again, especially since the Proud Family already had a well-built-up name and many fans that had been calling for its revival for years now. And so they decided that they would do just that and pick up where they left off in a way, except for in the reboot, the family is all the same age as when the first show ended, only now it's all set in the 2020s. It's all set in the modern era. This is done so that the show can tackle more modern issues and even talk about more modern holidays such as Juneteenth. However, we saw mixed reactions to one episode in particular, which saw the Proud Family take an out-of-character stance for the series. I really feel like there's just so many reviews and petitions that I've read about this episode that makes me think this just doesn't sound like the Proud Family, at least not the original. Normally, we see a more united approach to tougher topics such as racism, and I think that is why it did shock so many people when this episode was centered around the idea that slaves helped build America and that the sins of slaves the sins against slaves by slave owners just haven't been atoned for yet. There was even an entire song giving a brief history of slavery and segregation in the episode, but it made half of their audience feel uncomfortable, while the other half had to continue to explain why they felt that approach was valid. Keep in mind, they had tackled subjects like these before, and I'm not sure if it's a reaction to it being legitimately offensive to these people, or if it's an overreaction with how much of the woke culture we have floating around in society, where people are quick to turn into a crusader, even if it may be a bit of an overreaction. This was not the only racist thing viewership of the show has petitioned against. A lot of viewers actually started petitioning against the character Dejanay to have her removed from the show for being a caricature of what a stereotypical black woman might be to other people. At this point, there has not been a fourth season confirmed or denied for this series, but reading all this controversy, it just seems like the reboot, it's tough to say whether or not it's going to live on because of how much tension is in the air around the third season right now, which is the third season is what saw that particular episode that created a divide amongst their audience, really. And I tend not to weigh in with my own opinions or my own advice on things, but I think that we can see it pretty plain and clearly here on the Proud Family and Louder and Prouder. It's just that you have to create a safe space. You can't treat everyone like they're your enemy. I understand that some people's ancestors have suffered here, especially in my homeland of America. Myself, I'm Native American, so I fall under that particular plight. But if you want people to understand, more importantly, if you want people to feel your pain, you cannot create new pain for them here in the present. And so just always remember that there is a reason that Martin Luther King Jr.'s crusade worked so well. And it's because he had a gentle hand. He allowed for the love to remain between everybody that was involved in his marches, in his speeches. He reminded everybody that this was not coming from a place of hatred, but that he truly wanted everybody in society to heal and wanted the culture to improve. But when you start pointing fingers and talking about whose fault it is and who the bad guy is, it can be hard to set all of that aside. So, like I said, I tend not to give my own personal views on these sorts of topics, but that is just something that I feel like I would want all of my viewers to know, is that topics like this that can be difficult to discuss sometimes really aren't that difficult at all. You just have to create an environment where people can feel safe and feel like they can be heard. And then you'll see so much more progress that way. So going forward in life, just remember that if somebody isn't hearing you, then it's more than likely because they don't want to. And if they aren't progressive enough to have an open conversation, open discussion with you, especially if it's calm and collected and cordial and kind, then they're probably not worth your time entirely. And I'm sure that they have some growing of their own to do before they can fully engage in that sort of discussion. Well, moving on to our conclusion. See, the Proud Family was renowned for that sort of approach to things, where it was just gentle enough and also focused on the characters inside of the show rather than attacking people watching the show, that they were able to explain hard topics to a younger generation in their coming of age years without making them feel so alienated. And Louder and Prouder may have been a little too loud for a good portion of its audience, is what I would have to say. They certainly had their own way of tackling hard to discuss topics, but I honestly think that they probably should have stayed a little more true to their roots, like some of the other reboots that we've seen on this list. And actually, before we get too deep into talking about why that is, it's going to help, I'll just say it's going to help us answer our overarching question, are reboots necessary and successful? But we'll talk about that in our next episode, where we do an overview of this study series on our reboots. I'm kind of glad that this ended the way that it did, because the Proud Family, Louder and Prouder, not being confirmed or denied a fourth season, tells us that its future hangs in the balance, so to speak. And so we can't confirm whether or not it's been as successful as the original Proud Family yet. And I feel like that's a good way to end this study series, just because when we talk about it in our next episode, we'll be able to talk about why some of the reboot series that weren't as successful as their predecessors failed. And the Prouder Family, the Proud Family, Louder and Prouder, actually highlighted some of those issues across all of these series that we've talked about. But again, thank you for watching today. That has been this episode of LemonTalks. And remember, we all love each other out here. And if you watched the episode, I am truly grateful. And just remember that I'm not here to preach. You can live your life your own way, and by no means change anything about yourself. If you are a fiery, sassy individual who thrives on being controversial or being explosive with the way that they approach arguments, then by all means continue to do that. I was just simply saying that a more gentle approach has been historically more effective than others. But I love you all. Thank you for watching this episode of Lemon Talks. I will see you in the next episode.
Living is a life with meaning. I'll do what I love till my heart stops beating.